Good morning, and it's a delight to see so many friends, old and new, gathered here in St. Genevieve. I'm glad to be back. For those of you who know me, sorry to repeat, my name is Jim Baker. I spent a lot of years at Hewitt's Valley House, the historic site down the street for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So it's an honor to be back, and it's an honor to do some introductions this morning. The first one, briefly, is our esteemed mayor, Richard Genevieve, who's going to say a few words.
Great, thank you, and welcome all of you to St. Genevieve. It's certainly a pleasure to see such a great group come down here and visit our community. Every time I've seen Tim Good give the presentation a couple of times on the park stuff, and every time it kind of gets me because it reminds me of what a treasure, such a treasure that we have here. We actually don't have Tim doing commercials for us. I think he does such a good job. But again, we don't realize, I think, here, us natives, so to say, of the treasure that we truly have. And we appreciate everything and everything that you all do. And we're really excited about the national park. The designation of the national park could be just something great for our community, not only economically, but also to get that story out about St. Genevieve and what it really is and what we really have here. Also, some other exciting things that we're excited about happening is you see the House Presbyterian Church, the Silversmith's house, that they're getting real close to their goal. There's also a museum steering committee is started a capital campaign to raise over $1 million to purchase the Kennedy building on the square over there and repurpose it, similar to what this building has done, and move the museum over there. So we're excited about those things. A lot of nice things happening at St. Genevieve. And again, thank you all for coming.
So Steve with our scheduled program. It's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is a longtime friend of St. Genevieve. And in fact, about 31 years ago, a book called Colonial St. Genevieve hit the press here. It's been published by our good friend, very good friend, Rob, many years ago. And it's truly a turning point in the history of St. Genevieve. And I think if we were to write the chapters in modern St. Genevieve history, Colonial St. Genevieve would be heading a major point in which scholarship in terms of the colonial history of St. Genevieve took a much needed turn for the better. So we owe a great deal to Carl Expert, who's a professor of history emeritus from Illinois State University. He didn't stop at Colonial St. Genevieve, and as he said to me earlier this morning, there's no need to list the whole list. We all know them. But Carl has been recognized in a lot of ways. A couple years ago, he was awarded, I get this right, I want to pronounce the French correctly if I can, the Médaille d'Or by the French ambassador, as well as the Order of Palm Saving from the French government. Two very esteemed honors for his scholarship and his interest in French colonial history, which he has disseminated to all of us so beautifully. Most recently, though, the latest publication, St. Louis Rising, co-authored with Sharon, has just won an award itself from the State Historical Society of Missouri, their annual Missouri History Book Award, which was just presented to St. Louis Rising. So yet another honor for Carl and for Sharon as well. We're so delighted to have them, Carl, with us this morning, speaking on St. Joachim and St. Genevieve, and two became one. So it's my distinct pleasure to present my good friend, Dr. Carl J.
You can tell by the warmth of Jim's introduction that Jim and I have been friends for a very, very long time, more than 30 years. You may have noticed that originally I was going to discuss a different topic than the one I'm going to talk about this morning. And the reason I changed topics is that Kim Good of the National Park Service was reading my St. Genevieve book, and he emailed me and said, Carl, are you sticking with your discussion of when St. Genevieve emerged as a distinct village? And the argument I set out in the book was that it was about 1750. Despite beautiful signs like this. By the way, this is Bob's part of this conspiracy, but this is his photograph. And so I said, when Kim asked the question, I said, gee, Kim, I haven't even thought about that for over 30 years. I don't know. I don't know how well that holds up. And so because of Kim's interest in the subject and his conveyance to me that there still seems to be some confusion about it, I thought that I would change topics and discuss early St. Genevieve instead of the topic that I was originally scheduled to discuss. So there has been a lot of confusion generated by the fact, and this is a fact, something that Bob and I have been working on really together, about the issue of the two names that were indisputably used in the same community in the early period for about 10 years. And the two names were St. Genevieve, no doubt about that, but also St. Joachim. And so here is a case where we have, from 1759, where we have a reference to St. Genevieve, but nonetheless using the name St. Joachim here. Okay? And it's also, and this is kind of important, the village of St. Joachim. So Bob and I have been working together on this, and it's indisputable that these names for a period of time were used interchangeably, and they cause a lot of confusion about the village, but also a confusion about actually the date when the village emerged as a distinct entity in the Illinois country. And so we can see this. This is a civil record from the Kaskaskia manuscripts, as opposed. Yes, please.
Could you spell that? Second.
Yeah, it's Saint. In this case, it's spelled in different ways. But in this case, they've added a U, so it's Jouachain. But usually there is not a U in there. Any other? Yeah, please interrupt me as we go along. I don't have any problem with that. Okay, so moving on. This is a civil record as opposed to a religious record. And here is a religious record done by the former Jesuit of Baclan. Actually, he was actually a Jesuit. This is 1759 as well. And notice what he says up here. He's making a registry. This is from the parish records. By the way, Bob Mueller is the rating expert on the St. Genevieve. Can you hear me when I don't use this mic?
Yeah.
I don't need to use the mic?
Yes.
No.
I do need to use the mic. Okay, I'm just saying that Bob Mueller provided this document because he is the rating expert on the St. Genevieve religious records. And this is a reference then to the marriage register from the Church of San Joachim. You see it at the top? Okay. And once again, this is indisputably St. Genevieve. Right, Bob? Bob, you have to pick up here if I get too far off this. Okay. So we know that they were both being used. Here then we go back to another civil record from the Kaskaskia manuscripts, as opposed to a religious record. And here they talk about, once again, the village of San Joachim. And this is a piece of agricultural land outside of the village of St. Joachim, which was, of course, St. Genevieve. Okay? So, I just wanted to demonstrate it's in both religious and civil records. And then here is an attempt by the Jesuit Father Merat, who's so terribly important in this early period in the Illinois country. And he attempts to kind of straighten things out here, right? Does this straighten things out? Okay, yeah. What I mean by that is he refers to the parish of St. Joachim in the village of St. Genevieve. So he's distinguishing parish name, you know, like Kaskaskia was the parish of the Immaculate Conception. So, the Jesuits, you're saying there's the village of St. Genevieve, but there's the parish of San Joaquin. Whereas the earlier documents we saw were simply saying it's the village of San Joaquin. So he is trying to clear things up here.
What year is that?
1759. Being a good Jesuit, he's trying to clear things up, right? Okay, so here we are back to another. This is the St. Genevieve civil record, and here there is a reference. Once again, this picks up where Merhan left off, so that we have this guy living in St. Genevieve. This is an abbreviation for parish, in the parish of San Joaquin. So they seem to be trying to get things kind of straightened out here. That, okay, we'll call it the parish of San Joaquin, but the village is St. Genevieve. Once again, interrupt me if I'm going fast. Okay, so now, here we have, yes, thank you, Bob. So here is, once again, a Kaskaskia manuscript, a civil record from Kaskaskia, discussing a contract between two guys, and one of them is being identified as being from the parish of San Joaquin. The bottom there? Okay, but it is also spelled out that this is the parish of San Joaquin in Quebec. So this is what really starts to get things confusing. When you have the two parishes, and that there's a lot of communication between these two parishes. In fact, Louis Bolduc is from this parish, outside of Quebec, by Beaupré, down the river from Quebec. So you can see how things are going to get increasingly confused there. And then here is another one that's about an interpreter. Interesting guy. He's an interpreter for the Illinois nation, and he is. This is a contrat d'engagement, and here he is. One of these guys is selling something, and which is situated in San Joaquin, in the Seigneurie of the Seminary of Foreign Missions, from Paris at Quebec. And so once again, this is a local record, Kaskaskia manuscript, discussing San Joaquin, but they're discussing it in the Seigneurie up there in Quebec. So we can see how things got confused. Okay, so here is the St. Lawrence River Valley quickly. Down to the lower left is Quebec City. Here's the St. Lawrence. And here is the parish of San Joaquin, once again, where Louis Bolduc and a number of other local people were born. This village was assaulted when General Wolfe took his troops up the river in the summer of 1759. You can see it here designated as in flames. American troops under Wolfe assaulted the village, and they killed and mutilated the body of the priest. This was a religious war to some extent, the French and Indian War. And there at San Joaquin, to this day, they very, very carefully preserve the foundations of the old parish church, so that they, you know, like the license plate in Quebec says what? Meaning what?
I remember.
Remember what?
Everything.
Or the goddamn Brits got it. It's interesting. By the way, there is also, I could have photographed that, I made a pilgrimage to this thing. There's an absolutely spectacular, more recent parish church that takes this one. Interesting place to visit, especially because it's the little parish of Louis Bolduc, right? Yeah.
Yes.
We all go up there. so now here's a document that's caused a lot of mischief. It's located in this archives of the Seminary of Foreign Missions in Quebec, as you can see, one of the great archival collections up there, by the way. And here is a discussion of a guy named Louis Poulin. See if I can really use it. Louis Poulin from the parish of Saint Joachim. Okay? And this is dated 1732, 1730s. And here is a translation of that. Do I need to read it, or can you all see it?
Read it.
Read it, please.
Okay. This is from the Father Superior of Cahokia, a guy named Jean-Paul Mercier, who was a seminarian, a missionary at the Seminary of Foreign Missions. May 1732. Scarcely a month ago, I had the honor to send you with a certain Louis Poulin from the parish of Saint Joachim. Okay, so if you're thinking Illinois country, the town's there. Right? It's a reference to it. Send all the papers and documents that I helped you to adequately understand, blah, 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 in the matter of a new church in the prairie of Fort de Chartres. Margaret, are you still here?
Yeah.
You probably know this document because it refers to this project that you and Bob have been working on over there. Right? A reference to the new church in the prairie outside of the second floor, third floor?
Second on that.
Second floor. Okay, so we obviously have Saint Joachim in existence in 1732. QED, it's done, right? Except, of course, this guy, Louis Poulin, is from the parish in Quebec, which was demonstrated by Gail. Where's Gail? Gail had to dig up for me, as she is wont to do. Louis Poulin's baptismal record from the parish of Saint Joachim outside of Quebec. So it really is QED. I mean, the Saint Joachim in that 1732 letter obviously is not Saint Genevieve. It is obviously the one up in Quebec. Huh? So the 1730 stuff, you know.
Well, and Carl, the Seminary of Foreign Mission priests were never on the west side of the river, right?
That's true. That's correct. Only at Cahokia. They were never at Kaskaskia. They were never at Fort de Chartres either. Only at Cahokia.
They came in there. Yeah.
Only at Cahokia. By the way, this is that priest. Mercier is the one who made the beautiful map of the Cahokia area that archaeologists use all the time. It's a really terrific map. He was there. He was at Cahokia a long time. Okay, so now a document. We're going back to civil records now, rather than religious records. This is in the original. This is in the courthouse in St. Genevieve, where there is, of course, a wonderful French archive that very few people know about. And this, to the best of my knowledge, is the first use of the name St. Genevieve. And it was done in April. I don't know why you use Roman numerals here. Barrois was the notary. It's a notarial document. And he usually doesn't use Roman numerals, but he spells it out here that this is April 1751. Okay, let me say once again, this is the earliest known document to use the name St. Genevieve. And at this time, of course, there were no parish records being kept in St. Genevieve, because St. Genevieve wasn't a parish. This is first 1751. Okay, then we move to December 1751, January 1752. The famous commandant, McCarty, of originally an Irish family, but a French Marine at the time, McCarty arrived at Fort de Chartres in December 1751. And he almost immediately, once again, I can't be used to using this. Can you hear me? Can you hear me without it? Sure. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I don't know. Let me talk louder instead of using that. If I may do that. So McCarty arrived at Fort de Chartres. This would have been the third fort, Margaret. I've lost track of the forts. Never been the third.
That would have been the
That would have
third.
been the third, right, okay. So he arrived there in December 1751 and immediately set about composing a census of the Illinois country villages. This is an extraordinarily important census, this census of 1752, because he didn't finish it and send it to New Orleans until late in January 1752. So it's always called the 1752 census. This is extraordinarily important. I mean, everybody who studies the Illinois country in any way has to use this census. The original of this is in the Huntington Library in the famous Loudon collection out in San Marino, California. It's almost working good. In any case, McCarty was a semi-literate major in the French Marines, and notice the way he spells St. Genevieve. J-U-N-N-E. So I don't know how would an Irishman be pronouncing Genevieve? Something like that. In any case, he shows just a handful of households there. But here then is the second usage of the name. So when he arrives in December 1751, he is aware that there is some sort of an embryonic community across the river that people are calling St. Genevieve. He doesn't invent the name. The name was there already because we saw it in the notarial document from Barrois from earlier in 1751. If things are getting too complicated, stop me and we can go back. It was interesting to me because literally I hadn't looked at this stuff in 30 years and then I thought, gee, it's kind of interesting. So here's the second part. Notice what he says here. He says, the village of St. Genevieve, the Genevieve, and he identifies it as being de l'autre côté du fleuve, on the other side of the river. So we know exactly what he's talking about. Okay, in September 1752, McCarty had been in the Illinois country for about 8 months, and he drafted a really, truly extraordinary document, a document of 6 signalements. Signalement. Does anyone here know French well enough to know what signalement means? It's very specific. Yes, please.
Signs.
Pardon me?
Signs.
Sign. It means, in French military lingo, it means very specifically the identification of a soldier with a thorough physical description.
Can you turn off the mic that you're not using because it's feedbacking and the microphone?
Oh,
Yeah, it's feedbacking on you and causing a lot of background noise.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning this. Okay, so for some reason, and I have some suspicions about why he did it. McCarty, the commandant now, who was commandant, of course, on both sides of the river, drafted these 6 descriptions of Marines within his command. And in this case, he is describing a guy who was establishing himself at St. Genevieve. He's getting out of the French Marines, and McCarty is giving him land to settle himself on the other side of the river at St. Genevieve. So it was McCarty's habit to continue using that name St. Genevieve, which he had used originally in the census of January 1752. And so here, about 8 months later, he picks it up and is using it again. And these, I don't know, these are the only thorough physical descriptions I have ever seen of inhabitants of the Illinois country in the 18th century. The only ones. These 6 signalements done by McCarty, September 1752. Okay, so here is a translation. Nicolas Alvin, D. Fouillade, soldier in the company of Montcharpeau. Is this your guy from Arkansas Post?
Yes.
Yeah, same guy. That's right. So this is Illinois country 1752. Right, okay. goes on to become commandant at Arkansas. Correct. Okay. He is a native of the Faubourg of Saint-Antoine in Paris, the parish of Sainte Marguerite. Son of Nicolas Aubin and Louis-François, blah, blah, blah. He's age 30. He's 5 French feet high, which is 5'3", you see. He's only 5 feet in French measurement, but he's 5'3" in Anglo-American measurement. He has eyebrows and hair chestnut, face long, eyes blue, served as a soldier in the colony since 1737. He wished to settle here and was granted some land at St. Genevieve that he has worked for 1 year and already has several animals on. So this guy was in St. Genevieve as early as the summer of 1751. One of the very, very, very early residents of St. Genevieve. So here is the parish of Sainte Marguerite in Paris. The Place de la Bastille is off that way. The Place de la Nation is off this way. This is now on the 11th arrondissement. This is where this guy was baptized. It's his home parish. And here is the church in which he was baptized with the original baptismal font. So about my idea is field trip to Paris, pilgrimage to this church. We go to the baptismal font to see where one of the original settlers of St. Genevieve was baptized. And then we know a place where we can get a really good bottle of wine. One of the original. He was there as early as the summer of 51. That's early. That's early. Here's another one. He is also going to St. Genevieve. His name is Jean-André Vignon. He is a soldier. It's interesting he calls him a soldier because he wasn't technically a soldier. He was a Marine, but McCarthy's calling him a soldier. I guess that works as a generic kind of military man. And he, along with the earlier guy, is also going to St. Genevieve. And here he is. He's also a soldier in the company of Montcharvaux. He is not from Paris. He's from outside of Paris. But it's interesting to me, Margaret, you might want to comment on this. Almost everyone in the Illinois country was French-Canadian, and usually they came from Brittany or Normandy. But I'm discovering that the soldiers tend to come from Paris and the environs of Paris. Over and over again I see this. They're not from Normandy and Brittany like the French-Canadian settlers. They're from the Paris basin. Now, I don't know what the explanation for that is. If the Marine recruiters were working there, yes, please.
I just need to know what a Marine is.
A Marine?
Yeah, you said he wasn't a military man or a soldier. He's a Marine.
The French military men in this area were Marines, not soldiers, technically.
What are Marines?
They weren't troupes de la terre, they were Marines. Which meant that they were working for the ministries of Marine, the naval ministry, rather than the army ministry. I think that's true in the United States, isn't it? Sure. Marines are under the naval ministry.
Okay,
Same deal. And so here's another one of the first, one of the very, very earlier. Anyone else have a comment or question about that?
Yes,
Yes, please.
Saint Joliet was the saint of Paris, and as you just noted, most of the people from the East Bank were not Parisian. You suddenly have some.
That's a fact.
Is that possible? Possibly a connection on how you ended up with a name like Saint Joliet?
Oh, boy.
Saint Joachim, of course, is the husband of Saint Anne, and that Saint Anne is and was the patron of Canada. They are the parents of Mary, the grandparents of Jesus. So it may be a Canadian feeling.
You know, I don't know much about linguistics, but my guess is that the French spoken by, for example, this guy from Paris, was very different than the French that was being spoken by someone like Francois Vallée.
Not at that time, not at that time.
No, not at the time.
Okay. These are the ladies from Michigan. You don't
Contemporary visitors say that there is no difference between the French spoken in French Canada and the French spoken in France at that time.
No, Commandant Macardy, he's autre chose.
I'll grant you that.
He's a different deal altogether. Okay, so here is the 1760, Bobby knows that. This is the 1766 militia muster roll for St. Genevieve, done by this most extraordinary character, Philippe Rastel de Rocheblave. You can see his signature at the bottom. He was everywhere. He was at Braddock's massacre. He was at the Battle of Belle-Famille outside of Niagara. He was commandant in St. Genevieve, the first commandant in St. Genevieve. He eventually then became commandant in Kaskaskia. His life story is absolutely amazing. In any case, as commandant in St. Genevieve in 1766, you see, he was appointed commandant in St. Genevieve by Louis Saint-Ange de Bellerive, who himself went to become commandant in St. Louis. And so Rocheblave is parallel to Saint-Ange in St. Louis. French military officers, Marines, who are serving, not captains of the militia. These are military commandants. It's not the same as militia. See? Just as Saint-Ange was commandant, not captain of the militia in St. Louis, so Rocheblave was military commandant in St. Louis. And the captain of the militia was, as we can see here, Sire Vallée. This is Francois Vallée #1, Old Man Vallée. And you'll notice that that this fellow that we just saw, Vignon, this guy back here, Vignon, is by 1766, he is sergeant in the St. Genevieve militia. So between 1751 when he moved to St. Genevieve in 1766, this former French Marine, an enlisted man, had risen to become sergeant in the militia company in St. Genevieve. Kind of a significant position. I mean, he's not at the same level as Francois Vallée, obviously, but, you know, he's an officer in the militia. It's a big deal. And they note that in the parish records, you know, so-and-so is a witness at a marriage. Yeah, and he's a militia officer. They note that sort of thing. It's a big deal. Yes, please.
Is there any evidence that young men such as these Marines got free passage to America if they agreed to sign up into the military?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. You want to go to America? Join the Marines, for sure. It'd be interesting to know about French Marine recruiting officers in the Paris area, finding these guys from the remote parishes outside of Paris. I mean, it must have been happening. He didn't just stumble into the French Marines. He was recruited. There were recruiting officers around, for sure. Okay, you can see some other names here that you know. There is, of course, Francois Vallée. Then there is also his son, Charles Vallée. Notice that the captain is absent. That is to say, Rocheblave was composing this muster roll. The captain is missing, Vallée. But his son is also missing. My suspicion is they were on a trading trip to New Orleans. That would be my guess. They're off trading somewhere. But you can see other names. For example, here is Bolduc, right here, spelled a little oddly. And there's the Deguire family here. There's the Duchauquet family. There's the Gagnon family. There are a bunch of names with which you'll be familiar here. Okay, so Bob is urging me to move on, get done with this. Here is, this is the Rocheblave, whose name you see down here, got married in Kaskaskia to a local woman. And this happens to be the baptism of his first child in 1765, which took place in St. Genevieve, even though they were at that time still residents of Kaskaskia across the river. It's just before he comes over to become military commandant in St. Genevieve. So here's a map, a French map, done by Jacques-Nicolas Bellin, and it shows the Merrimack River there. It shows the Merrimack River. Here it shows the lead mines. So St. Genevieve here, and it spells it out, shows the Saline. It says, St. Genevieve, French village established 3 years ago. The map is 1755, and so this cartographer working in Paris, but with information from America, is setting the founding of the village, if you can say so. There was no founding, it emerged, it wasn't founded by anyone. In any case, he said saying 1752. I'm willing to say 1751, maybe even 1750. But the 1735 stuff is going to start raising eyebrows when the National Park Service comes. So here you can see the stream down of the old town starting to emerge here across the river. Very small place at this time, 1766. Here is a redoing of the 1766 census, maybe done in, I'm thinking it was done, Sharon, are you here? Was this done in Havana? This Spanish calligraphy, what do you think, George? It's too much for New Orleans. New Orleans. In any case, there are St. Genevieve and St. Louis are there, of course, and here is the St. Genevieve. Number 1 is Rocheblav, because he's military commandant. Number 2 is Duclos. Now, Helen, are you here?
Yeah.
So this Duclos must be the grandson of Marie Ruenza. He's 1/4 Illinois Indian, right? And he's the son of the Marine officer who married Marie Ruenza's daughter, right? So he is listed, for some reason, he's not a terribly wealthy man, but he's listed as number 2, and then comes Francois Valley. But you'll notice when you get over to the things that they own, like real estate and slaves, that Francois Vallée simply drowns out the entire census. In 1766, there is no one in Upper Louisiana remotely as wealthy as Francois Vallée. Remotely. He stands like a colossus over the region at that time. Okay, so in keeping with Tim Good's question to me originally, what's going on with the dating of St. Genevieve? So I thought I'd look around the websites a little bit. What's on the internet? So here's one piece from the internet. They walk a little, settled in the early 1700s. Yeah, a little bit of a stretch. Then we have this one, founded in 1735 by French-Canadian colonists. So far, so good on that one. 1735, you know. Yeah. Right, and then there's this one. There's a double whammy here. Because they got St. Genevieve founded in 1735, they got St. Louis founded, of course, by Leclerc, not true. 1764. So, you know, it just goes on and on. So, in 1984, Margaret Brown and I were sitting on Graham's back porch, eating their pecans from their own pecan trees and drinking martinis. And I think Jeanette Bosler was there, Myron Savage was there, Stan Drury was there. And Bernie, I don't know many of you know Bernie in his wonderful voice, Eckberg, it doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference what you say. St. Genevieve's going to do exactly what St. Genevieve wants her to do. And as usual, Bernie was exactly right. I'd just like to make 2 quick comments. The images I used this morning in a modest production about a modest topic came from 8 different archives in 4 different countries. This is the nature of this kind of French colonial history. You have to be searching around these sites, okay? You'll also notice that it's a collaborative effort. It depended a lot on Bob Mueller and always depended on Gail and Suzanne, the Michigan ladies, who are indispensable to this work, even though they're up in Michigan, or maybe because they're up in Michigan. And in the deep background, there is always Margaret Brown. Because without her work on the Kaskaskia manuscripts, none of this stuff would be being done. Really, none of it.
If you did not know Sharon Person at the beginning of the history conference, you know her now. And if you don't know her now, you want to know her. She is a professor at St. Louis Community College. She's taught English as a second language for the past 25 years. And she, this semester, is on sabbatical, and she is grateful to SDLCC for granting her that sabbatical. In 2007, she received an MA in history from the University of Missouri at St. Louis. She has written extensively and researched even more on the colonial history of St. Louis. And as co-author, she has received an award for the best book of 2015. You heard reference from that from Jim. And that award is from the State Historical Society, and she co-authored it, and that is St. Louis Rising. She and her husband live in Manchester, and they take rides on the Katy Trail. And when they can get away from their cats and birds and dogs, they do things like this. And they like to get away, and I am happy to present Sharon Person Parnell.
Now the speakers have been quite good at speaking rather than reading a paper, and I had this little conceit that I could help plan a conference and also present at it, and I hope I am never deceived like that again. And I realize I'm the last thing between you and lunch, and I'm going to make you earn it. So, I thought that was a clever font. I'm not sure you can read it. This is our old friend William Shakespeare. Now God, stand up for bastards. This is spoken by an illegitimate son, Edmund, invoking the god's support in a plot that he was launching against his legitimate half-brother. Of course, Shakespeare is a wonderful source for the complexity of human relations. The Kaskaskia manuscripts in the St. Genevieve archives, but perhaps no less than Shakespeare. I'm going to leave him up there for a while. All right. I'm going to start in 1738 in Kaskaskia. The Jesuit curé René Tartarin addressed a letter to Montmartre in France. He was writing to defend the practice that the priests had had to marry the local French, Canadian men and Indian women. This métissage, or the mixing of different peoples, happened both with local Illinois Indian women and more problematic to the priests with Indian slave women. Tartarin is quite touching, actually. He decried the unjust wars that brought Indian slaves from the western and southern nations to the Illinois country. If French men and Indian women could not marry, there would be scandal, said Tartarin. There would be scandal and disorder. The métis bâtards, the children of French and Indian unmarried couples, they caused trouble. They lacked a French upbringing, and they could not inherit their father's property. He mentioned this several times. They could not inherit their father's property. They could not expect any inheritance. This excluded them from an important French way of life. And of course, Tartarin was writing because it made the priest's religious mission with the Indians much more difficult. Carl showed you a lot of documents. By the way, that's another conceit. I think I can stand up here after Carl and give presentation. This is what I do. I don't have pretty pictures. I spend all day, as many days as I can, and I'm loving my sabbatical, reading things like this. And when you do a close-up, it doesn't come out a whole lot better. I'm going to tell you what this is about. Hang on just a second. So we're talking about the inability to inherit by children whose parents were not married. This arises from the interpretations of the coutume de Paris, the French customary laws. They govern many aspects of domestic life in New France, again encompassing New France, the Illinois country, all the way down to New Orleans. And the way inheritance worked was this: all legitimate children had an equal share in their parents' estate. Illegitimate children born outside of marriage were bastards, and they were excluded from the inheritance of their parents' estate. But the coutume de Paris was customary law, and customary law has an interesting definition. It was defined as a legal practice of which the people approve, which is introduced by their tacit consent, and which is observed over a considerable period of time. And how the French practiced inheritance and illegitimate children is what I want to look at today. So this is a document from 1730. It was drafted in the village of Fort de Chartres. Two French-Canadian men came together with the royal notary, Jean-Baptiste Placé, to write up an agreement they had made. 1730, this was before Tatar's letter. The first man, Thomas de Mars, consented to pay the other, Godin, 8 livres a month for 2 years for Godin to take care of his natural child. It says, l'enfant naturel, to take care of his natural child. This is an amazing document because the mother's name is also here. I'm sure that I cannot pronounce Indian correctly. Jeanne-Yvonne Patokoy, and I thank Michael McCaffrey. That means Comanche woman. This woman was undoubtedly a slave. So it's a very short document, just 1 page. It raises a lot of questions, and yet it has important elements regarding my topic that reappear throughout the decades. And the first one is the terminology. The child is not called illegitimate, the child is not called bastard, it's called a natural child. And you can find this term through the documents, and these are the children that I'm going to talk about. In sacramental records, you do see many illegitimate references, and that's another paper for another day. I don't think I've got another sabbatical in me. It's my 3rd one, that's 21 years. Don't think I can do more. He's looking at me to be tired. I'm so jealous of the people who are retired. Okay. So the first was the terminology. Second, this was a father who admitted paternity. He admitted that he was the father, and he assumed financial responsibility for the child's maintenance of food and clothing. And in this particular case, there was no litigation involved. This was an agreement between 2 men, and the notary. It made it a formal agreement, but there was no litigation. This was not the result of a sentence. And again, unfortunately, one of the most common things is that there was no more information about the mother. She does not appear anywhere else in any record. Another natural child whose father took responsibility was named de Geer, a name that you know in St. Genevieve. This was Jean-Baptiste de Geer, and the natural daughter was named Marie Joseph. I'm going to call her Joseph. That's how she usually appears in the records. Her father was Jean-Baptiste de Geer, the master tailor in Kaskaskia, and in 1747, he purchased Marie Josette and her sibling, described as 2 natural children, born to the slave of the royal notary Joseph Fouché. It was likely the death of the mother, who was not mentioned, that brought about the need for this agreement. De Geer, similar to what de Mars had said, bien justement, he took over responsibility for the children from Fouché, but this is a purchase agreement. He was De Geer was buying his children from Fouché. The price that he paid was 1,000 livres. It was a typical amount for 2 young slaves. This was a transaction for human property, and yet it was not framed in terms of the Code Noir. The Code Noir, the rules pertaining to masters and slaves, promulgated in Louisiana in 1724, said that there was a penalty of 300 livres for any white subject who cohabited with a slave of another man, and there was also a penalty for the slave owner who allowed this said cohabitation to take place. We have never seen any evidence that such a fine was ever levied, and the amount that Genevieve paid for his children does not correspond to those numbers. So another thing that I have to say at the outset is that this is a small district, and a larger topic that has been much discussed, and very importantly, I have to say, is the whole issue of the sexual relations. Were they consensual, non-consensual, transitory liaisons, concubinage, involving French-Canadian men and local Indian women or the slave women? I'm looking at the children. So that has already happened. Again, it's an important topic, but it's not what we're talking about today. Here's a little image of the Coutume de Paris. This is on my nightstand. This is what I pick up and read before I go to bed at night. This is the 1688 version. And what I found is that these natural children, when they married, they had sacramental marriages in the church. Some of the women had marriage contracts, the French marriage contract, like a prenup. As soon as they did that, the Coutume de Paris embraced them, and they became more French than Father Tatar was perhaps giving some of them credit for. So let me take just a second, and this is the geeky part, so hang on, start thinking about lunch. This is what I call Coutume 1.0, all right? When a man and a woman married, they formed a community property, and that was each of them put their personal property, and then any real estate they acquired during the marriage was held in common. The husband was the manager. When a spouse died, the estate was divided 50-50. Half went to the surviving spouse, and again, half divided equally among all the children. And those of you who are Coutume geeks, just like I am, know this is a little bit oversimplified. An important right that a widow had under the Coutume was renunciation. If the estate, that 50% of the estate was the estate was too overburdened with debt, she could take everything that she had brought into the marriage and walk away and leave the rest of the estate to the creditors. There'll be a quiz on that later. So I want to come back and talk about some marriage contracts, and Emily's out there saying, why does Sharon always talk about marriage contracts? I didn't know this was going to lead there. Sorry. I didn't know this was going to lead me to marriage contracts. So I have natural daughters in marriage contracts. The image you gave Carl, you didn't hear me. Like, over there was Maria Bossier marrying Andre Rose. She was a natural daughter. Her mother, in her baptismal record, again, pardon my pronunciation, Achika Panisway. Marie Aubuchon, more about 1730. Belting identified her mother as a naturalist Indian. I'm going to talk about the third Marie Joseph Genevieve, born about 1745. Her Indian slave mother's name was Mary Run. And I have to talk about Marguerite Ballet. So I can't talk about all these, and look at my page. I crossed out all kinds of stuff to try to make this shorter. But I think when I submit the article to Liz, I'll put these other folks back in. So I look forward to go on with paper. But for now, I'm going to talk about religious sex. Not using that, sorry. Okay. I included this because I think it's one of the most beautiful pages I've seen in a register. Thank you, ladies. My heart skips a beat or two when I see something like this. And Marie Joseph Degier's marriage record is down there. This is it slightly enlarged. This was a typical marriage record. Father Fun, Carl mentioned a few minutes ago, married Marie Joseph Duguer and Louis Thiriat de Saint-Jean. And this is the marriage record, and I want to point out that I'm sure you can all read. All that it says is that she is the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Duguer. It does not say legitimate, it does not say natural, it does not say anything. It just says she is the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Duguer. No mention of a mother. Now, this is the sacramental marriage. I'm sorry, I have to back up. 2 days before this, the royal notary came to Duguer's house in Kaskaskia to draft a marriage contract. Well, guess who the royal notary was? Joseph Boucher, the former owner of Marie Josette and her mother. And I think they're small town coincidences. And I don't know how that one played out. The contract also, matter-of-factly, made Marie Josette as the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Duguer, omitting the word natural. The witnesses at the marriage were among the leading citizens of St. Genevieve. And Jean-Baptiste Duguer gave his daughter and son-in-law an arbent and a half of plowland next to his own in St. Genevieve. This was a marriage contract, and it kind of enhanced the benefits of a wife. Thiriat promised his new wife certain sums that are typical in marriage contracts, should she survive him. One Canadian researcher described marriage contracts as preparation for widowhood, and that certainly applied in Marie Josette's case. So, this sacramental record shows that they had created a legitimate marriage. They launched this community property regime. Now their children would be legitimate. So it's really important to remember that for an illegitimate child, there was absolutely no prohibition on that child marrying legitimately in the church and starting a new line of descendants. And I said again, and there were no shortcuts here. They had all three bands. A lot of marriage records, you know, one band and the other two were skipped. They had all three of them. All right. This is what you're never supposed to do with PowerPoint, just put a whole lot of words on a slide. This is not a critical slide. It's just for those of you who are getting tired of listening and want to kind of read ahead to see what's happening. So, Jean-Baptiste Duguer, he's master tailor. In his inventory, he had 2 wigs. It's very interesting. He's a master tailor in Kaskaskia, moved to St. Genevieve, 1759, shortly after the marriage. So, backing up from where I was, 1759, we just got married in St. Jean. Okay. Jean-Baptiste Duguer suffered from recurring bouts of some disease as he grew older, and he needed to attend to these issues. So he made an agreement with his daughter and son-in-law that they would take care of him for the remainder of his days, and the father would give them all of his possessions. But this arrangement went sour after a few years. It was only a verbal agreement. There was nothing written. So Jean-Baptiste Duguer brought suit against his son-in-law to try to recover the portion of his estate that he felt had been misused. The judgment in the suit fell against Thiriat, against the son-in-law. He scrambled to make partial payment. I was so happy that Bob Masron referred to kind of middling folk. These are the middling folk. So the judgment in the suit fell against Thiriat. He scrambled to make a partial payment, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and he promised to pay the remainder as soon as he could. Well, he died. Thiriat died in 1773, and the balance, perhaps the entire debt, was left unpaid. Marie Josette, again, 1773, they inherits in 1759. She had 5 minor children, minor meaning under the age of 25. The year after Thiriat's death, their oldest daughter married. Marie Josette, again, no mention of her origin. She is acting fully as any French wife, mother, widow would. She accepted the terms of the marriage contract on her minor daughter's behalf. Jean-Baptiste Duguer stood among the family friends of the bride. This is Joubert we were talking about. Thiriat's daughter married Joubert. we'll be discussing what he did there, where that was. So, Jean-Baptiste Seguier stood among family and friends of the bride. He signed a marriage contract, but Marie Josette was carrying all the legal authority that day. Further, she managed the estate left by Thiriot on her own. She waited for 3 years, though, to conduct an inventory. In that inventory, the estimators noted a barn that was about to fall into the river and the livestock. They had ducks. But the most valuable livestock were 2 pair of oxen. And you know how it is in the archives. There's another document. This one is dated 1779, and we don't know the background. But in 1779, Jean-Baptiste Seguier decided to pursue the settlement awarded him in the judgment against his son-in-law, who had been dead at this point for 5 years. That meant that he was going after the estate that his daughter was managing. And Marie Josette got together her friends, found her marriage contract, and said, no, this is not going to happen. And this is where it gets interesting. Marie Josette petitioned Francois Vallée, avec beaucoup de peine, with pain, with difficulty, for permission to renounce the estate of her first husband. Remember that renunciation thing? She could take what was due her and walk away and leave the rest of the estate to the creditors. Okay. Now, because she had a marriage contract, she had that better deal. And so I did the math, and it's beautiful. Even though I'm a linguist and a historian, this is great math. By the time you added up all the extra sums that she was awarded in the marriage contract and value everything else, she walked away with pretty much everything from the Thiriot estate. And her father, who was trying to get 1,300 livres, ended up with about 60. You know, you're not supposed to do things like this, but but along with this renunciation, she wrote a letter to justify why she was asking for renunciation. There were time limits on when you had to do this, and she had missed them by years. And this letter is one of the most remarkable documents I've ever seen, so I want to take it and tell you about it. And Marie Josette was illiterate. She could not write. And so there's all this argument about, well, who wrote it and how much did they influence the words that ended up in the letter? We don't know. But the 1779 petition powerfully drew on the language of family ties and the fear of destitution. And I think these are 2 things that would have found strong resonance in a Roman Catholic community on the banks of the Mississippi River that was very flood prone. Marie Josette stated she had had no knowledge of this debt owed by her first husband to her father. And you might say, yeah, I don't believe that. But I do, and I can't go into all the little kooky reasons. I do believe that she did not know about the debt. She said her father never notified her of the debt after her husband's death. That's a step he should have taken. And then she went on to say she had always lived with the realization that her father hated her and her children. Wow. We don't see that too often. Thiriot's death had left her with numerous children in a house that was about to fall into the Mississippi, along with the barn. The small estate with her first husband was not enough to support 5 children, and so she had married a second time. And of course that complicated things further. The money her father demanded could not be paid from her new husband's current earnings. He was a simple day worker. The family would be reduced to begging if she were forced to pay the debt. She could not believe her father would ever want to reduce her to this extreme misery. Francois Vallée passed her exceptional petition up the line of authority to the Lieutenant Governor in St. Louis. He wasn't, passing the buck. He actually had to do that. He gave a very interesting response. He refused to overturn the original sentence against Thiriot, the son-in-law. But he said the marriage contract must take precedence. And so that was how she was able to take away most of the estate and leave her father with very little. I doubt she was happy about the whole thing. So, Jean-Baptiste Seguier, he could sign his name, which, by the way, distinguishes him from the Seguier-Roche family. He could sign his name. This is the last page of the marriage contract. There's his name in the middle, and all around it, Marie Josette and, her husband, and I don't know, say what you will about that picture, but it's kind of real watching. So, he'd had a calamitous falling out with his only child, but people are so complex. In February 1781, he offered his home to his daughter and granddaughter for the marriage contract ceremony, and that's what this is. So Marie Francoise Thiriot was marrying Charles Belmar. By the way, Jean-Baptiste de Geer had also sued Charles Belmar, but he was not yet married to his granddaughter.
Excuse me, Sharon, if I may say so, look at the signature of Francois Vallée in the bottom right. His secretary did the Francois part, and then he struggled and got in the Vallée part.
I like all the crosses instead of X's.
Oh, yeah.
The cross of Jesus as a signature rather than a X.
So, the family was all together, but it didn't seem to reestablish any harmony. For about 2.5 weeks later, de Geer drew up another one of these old age agreements with somebody totally different. Pierre Murel and his English wife Elizabeth in St. Germain. He transferred to them all his property, his land, his animals, his house, his furnishings. He kept only the room he occupied, and his tobacco and peltries, and he had an awful lot of tobacco. De Geer's black slave named Marie Louise would supply the entire household with firewood, and when de Geer died, the couple would receive the possessions he had kept for himself. Ask me later once you got Marie Louise. Francois Vallée, as lieutenant, could approve this arrangement, and the Burrells moved into Jean-Baptiste de Geer's house. Well, he died later that year in 1781, and Father Thibault, whom we all met in the cemetery on Thursday, right? And I thanked him for his wonderful entries that were often more than the minimum, and this was one of them. Jean-Baptiste de Geer, he said that he had always demonstrated a strong Christian faith. But this endorsement surely was pushing his soul up towards heaven, right? So the inventory of de Geer's possessions proceeded quickly, usually the case after the death of a single man, but Marie Josette stepped in, and she declared that she should receive the proceeds of the auction of her father's estate because she was his daughter. So she pulled out her 22-year-old marriage contract, that piece of paper that she could not read. And that marriage contract, again, explicitly confirmed the father-daughter relationship that she was claiming. And this is where it gets interesting. If you jump to a conclusion before, in 1782, I'm sorry, I don't remember what's next. Okay. I was just thinking about things falling into the Mississippi River. In 1782, Marie Josette's petition stated that she was de Geer's natural daughter, that her father died intestate and there were no other legal heirs. This was, to me, remarkable, but just a necessary move. She was a child born outside of marriage, and she could not inherit her father's estate without some intervention. The renunciation that she had done was a very different matter. That was a husband-wife widow. But this was that generational thing that was a problem. A further complication was the fact that de Geer had made this arrangement with the Burrells. They were supposed to get his stuff, and that meant that the agreement would have to be renegotiated, and that's exactly what happened. Arbiters sat down with the Burrells, and you can see in the statement of the inventory, they were able to keep some of the property, the house, portion of the land, a little bit of money. The estate in the end, Jean-Baptiste de Geer's estate, was encumbered to almost 2/3. Marie Josette in the end was awarded the remainder of his estate, about 800. Not a windfall, but surely it would help against the economy. Marie Josette de Geer's story has a fitting, even satisfying epilogue. She died in 1788, having taken a third husband after the death of her second in 1786. Her third husband was Francois Vernier, which is a name, she didn't have any children with their marriage. So, four surviving daughters, 3 of the 4 married, decided they were not going to call officials for an inventory. The estate was far too small. They allowed their new stepfather, Bernier, to keep his share of the estate. They agreed to divide the remaining items from their mother equally and amicably, was the phrase, and without legal assistance. So the issues of natural children, property, marriage contracts, all started with Carl, especially in the Francois Valley discussion of his several wills. Composed as perhaps he began to feel his mortality might frustrate his wish and his responsibility to provide for his natural daughter, Marguerite. So he included his natural daughter in his wills. However, he did not die before she reached marriageable age. And so the property he desired her to have, including a slave family, became a dowry in her marriage contract in 1778. Valet's legitimate male children, heirs in his conjugal family, signed the marriage contract. That means they agreed that they were giving up part of their inheritance for their illegitimate half-sibling. I find that kind of remarkable. So the weight of the documents that I've examined, and this is a small portion of them, suggests that this marriage in the Roman Catholic Church and participation in various aspects of civil life all ultimately mattered far more than the circumstance of birth outside of marriage. Marie Josette's case tells us that the circumstance was not the circumstance was not simply erased or waved away as an inconvenience, but the spirit and practice of French law accommodated and allowed this custom to take root. In 1738, Father Tartare had described the disorder of the Métis Bâtards as sans-foi, sans-loi, sans-bien. But from the earliest years, Illinois country villagers demonstrated that they were already finding order through the religious and legal customs that they had. Now that's a really not satisfying conclusion for me, okay? Somebody's got to say, wait a minute, that was all women. What about the men? Maybe we're not supposed to worry about the men, but I do. I worry about the men. Marie Lavoisier, who was there, and I didn't have a chance to talk about. She had a brother, I assume also a natural born brother. Interestingly, he was not wealthy in Cascade management, but he was at her second marriage in 1759. Oh, I would love to see that. We'll have to do that later. And what about that comment by Father Gibault that De Geer had always been a strong Christian? He perhaps never married so that he never created, or as Charles would say, procreated legitimate heirs. It's complicated. I don't have good answers. It's very intriguing, and there's lots of room for more research. Thank you very much.